you're hitting on what I would love to hear you speak to more, because it's a tension that exists. Again, we're talking all about tensions, right? I feel like I keep bringing these up, but to me, it's what, it's like the spice of life. It's what makes what we do so interesting. The tension between what customers or consumers want and then what the business wants, right? And those are definitely not always the same thing. And just because, Cracker Barrel or anyone that you want to name is known for a particular thing does not necessarily mean that that's what the company wants to continue to be known for. And I think that you can slip and slide into your company can slip and slide into different territories maybe that you never intended to go if you are only listening to what your customer wants. However, my bigger fear for most organizations is that the opposite happens, is that they stunt their own growth because they have such a fixed idea of what they want, because this is the company we're building, this is what we want. And so they harm themselves. They saw off the limb that they're sitting on because they're so set on what they want versus actually stopping to analyze the market and understand what the market wants, right? Has your experience been similar to live in that tension of kind of like, okay, here's what this company wants to be, but that's not necessarily what the customers are telling them they should be? And how does a company navigate that if kind of where the opportunity is maybe outside of where people are comfortable being?
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest challenge with a lot of,
fair enough,
when they bring us in, right? But like I think they can see it, but they're reluctant to go there, right? Like they're steeped in, this is how we've done it for however many years, but like, how do we move on from that?
Maybe the question I'm asking almost at the core of that is how much of that resistance to go there is just like personal from people that are, C-suite, whatever, executive level, that have a lot of pull in the organization, versus how much of it is actually objective and professional and not based on emotion or feeling or like, oh, my granddaddy built this company and I would never let it be this or whatever, right? Like, how much of that is tied up into the humanness of who you are dealing with?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is tied up in the humanness, right? Like, I think it's again, it comes back to that whole idea of like, we've done it this way for so many years. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you work in, like, especially in the industrial space, like, they've been in that role for a number of years, right? Like they're established, like, this is the way we've done it, and status quo be like, change be damned.
Yeah.
And so then you get, turn over a new CEO, a new CFO, and they're like, well, why aren't we growing? Right. And it's like, well, we're trucking along, and they're probably still growing, but it's 1%, 2%. They're
Absolutely.
Not. Though I love the way the one client I worked with talked, like, we want an unfair part of the market or unfair portion of the market, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is the mindset you need, mm-hmm. and status quo is not going to get you there.
Yep.
And so, like, one of the things that I always bring up is like customer centricity. Like, everything evolves around your customer. If it's B2B, B2C, right? Like, if you could sell the best product that solves all my needs, but if you can't tell me that it doesn't matter, right? So, like, messaging and audience is super important, and I think that's why we always start with, like, what's your customer segment?
Yep.
Like, do you know who you're selling? Like, what's the audience you're selling to? And that can help define some of those things, like price point. You can sell, where can you charge a premium? Do we want to charge a premium? Who are we competing with, and how? But it needs to revolve around the customer, that centricity of them.
How do you start to, so let's maybe you can go back to the earlier example you were using, or you can invent a fictitious one. It doesn't really matter to me. Say that you've got some level of success in business. We're going to assume, maybe for the sake of this illustration, it's not a $500 million company. It's a company that desires to be a $500 million company one day. Okay. How does one begin to start to segment? And we'll pretend even that you have a CRM with some data in it, or just data of some kind that you can start to look at. Where do you begin? Like, how many different personas are you looking at? Is there a limit on how many personas you should have or you should not have? And then the sub question that I would really love to ask underneath that is customer motivation, I think, and maybe we'll just circle back to this in a minute and we'll put a pin in this for now, because that to me is one of the most fascinating aspects of sales and marketing in general. And it goes counter to what so many companies think, right? And it's one of the things I've said, I think probably a couple times on the show, but certainly in newsletters and blogs and stuff I've written, which is that the reason that your company is selling is not necessarily the reason that customers are buying, right? So a great example of this, we sent my autistic son Leo to a Christian school in town. Here was a private school. And at the time that we did that not just because it was a Christian school, which was great. We were very excited about that aspect, but we did it because they were the school the only school at the time that was able to promise us a one-on-one support system for our son. And we were under the very strong belief that that was going to be the best thing for him. A spoiler alert, it was not necessarily at that school in the long run, but a one-on-one support system was what he needed. So I just want to point out I was right. But anyway, what I said, in one of the meetings with the principal there, as we were kind of onboarding and entering the final stages, because again, we were a unique case, a unique family that was coming in. And so we might have been a little bit extra with how many meetings we had to have with everyone just to really get on the same page of like, let's try to set ourselves up for success all the way around, right? But I made it clear to him, like, hey, I love your, the Christian curriculum. I'm good with all of that, obviously. But that is not the reason I'm sending my son here. And if you eventually cease to be able to, support my son, or we lose that one-on-one support, like that is the thing I'm here for, and that will cause me to leave, right? And again, ultimately it ended up not working out for a handful of different reasons, and that's fine. We eventually did get somewhere back to his old school that worked out really well. But the lesson that I'm trying to point out there is the reason that we purchased in that instance was not the reason that they sold to us typically. And I think that companies lose sight of that. And sometimes that's, in that instance, you don't really care if the reason that you're selling, like as long as you make the sale, you get the money, you don't really care. But other times I think it's absolutely crucially important, right? That you understand exactly what the motivation is of your customer.